Welcome back to Pod by the Bay. I'm Seth Varnadore, joined by Steeg. We are here in another jam-packed week of USF athletics. We'll get to that shortly, but first, let's talk about our friends over at Homefield. Steeg, is that a Homefield hoodie you're wearing right there? It's going to be nice and chilly tomorrow.
It is. We've got it preemptively on. It's preemptively warming, as you can see. We're keeping everything as fresh as we possibly can around these parts. So got to have my nice, comfortable hoodie on.
Yes, and if you use our code BAE15, you get 15% off your first order at homefieldapparel.com. Somebody left us a comment on YouTube, said, hey, maybe you should put the web address on the banner. So we did. I thought it was a great idea. It's also, our affiliate link is in the description of the video as well. If you want to use that, that helps us out. But if it's your first purchase, use code BAE15 for 15% off your first order. It's not going to get here in time for the cold, but they do have nice quality hoodies that can keep you quite warm. And if you're looking for some gifts coming up for people that aren't USF, they got a wide variety of teams and some just fun, kind of neutral teams that a lot of people like to go to. So, Steve, always high quality stuff.
Yeah, I have like Youngstown State and UC Irvine, Oklahoma State. I'm not gonna lie, their like base T-shirts, like the plain ones, are like they're fantastic. Like those are just great stuff.
Very high quality. So really good stuff over there. And like we said, if it's your first order, use code BA15 for 15% off that first order. If you order enough, Steeg, it's basically like getting a free shirt. So
it's free.
You just gotta order a lot and you get that free shirt. Use our link in the description. Our affiliate link helps us out, helps you out by getting some home field. So Steeg, another packed week. We're in that time of the year where there's a lot going on.
Yeah.
last week when we were on, we got instantly cold takes exposed live on air. Almost happened again last night. I don't think you went too far out.
Oh no,
on the limb that the game. I don't think you said it was officially over, but you got pretty close to that line, and USF made a thrilling comeback against UTSA. You got to give USF credit for keeping fighting. You've got to give UTSA some credit for just absolutely choking the game away. But I think one thing you can definitely say about the USF team, and I think when you look back on this team, the one thing you'll remember is that they just consistently fought and played hard despite whatever kind of tough circumstance they came up against. Obviously, really tough ones at the beginning of the year and kind of throughout the year, but just even in game, this team does not quit, and they've not quit on their coaches. And that's tough to do when you're in kind of the middle of a really tough stretch of basketball. But to me, I think that's how this team will be remembered. Are you kind of in the same set of a mindset there?
Yeah, I mean, I think you mentioned the Oklahoma City Thunder fan base used to joke about their like season from like this
the Plagues of Egypt season.
The Plagues of Egypt season. That's what it is. We're having the same thing. Like Amir dying, obviously, like that's by far and away the absolute worst thing you could ever possibly have happened to a team. But then basically, like most of your team ends up getting injured and or hurt and or suspended, and so you're basically rolling a 7-player lineup that is 6 guards and 1 big, and keeping in mind that one of those guards is incredibly undersized. And I mean, full, cold take me. Like I at the 9-minute mark when UTSA opened up a 20-point lead, Seth, I appreciate you for trying to make me face. That was over. Like I think I said, and I quote, "There is no way a team is going to mismanage the final 6 minutes of a game to blow a 17-point lead.
Welcome to the beauty of college basketball.
And the thing was, and like again, I will always give credit to USF for this. Like they had to make the shots, they had to force the turnovers, they had to play stout defense. Absolute shout out to Brandon Stroud, who just carried it defensively for like 4.5 minutes.
17 rebounds.
Yeah,
had a great steal, kind of at the end of the game to kind of flip it in USF's favor there at the end. Unbelievable effort by him.
Yeah, but on the other side of the coin, and we have to talk about this. That's absolute malfeasance by UTSA.
Well, this is why there is kind of, I said kind of jokingly, welcome to college basketball. That's a lot of basketball now. And it's because if you're just kind of play high variance where I'm going to shoot a lot of threes, like I'm sure a lot of people remember the Houston Rockets going like 0 for 27 from 3.
Mm-hmm.
And just, they won a bunch of games by bombing threes, and then they hit a really cold spell and lost. And it's just like when you're that three dependent, which it seems like they were, if you go cold, man, somebody can come back and get you pretty quickly.
Yeah, that's wild to me because like USF was pretty three dependent last year. Like they had the ability to get interior shots and everything out of the way, but like they were pretty like if they couldn't hit from three, like it was like done for them. But like they at least could somewhat adjust to drive and score. Like besides like Selton Miguel not being able to like do a left-handed layup, like you could probably rely on Chris Youngblood to like drive and get a basket that way. I don't think Primo Spears drove the basket at all the entire game, including like I think at some point I said if UTSA just fouls USF and USF is forced to just chuck up shots or whatever, or on the other end having to foul themselves and you have to just hit free throws, you're probably going to win that game still anyways. Like you had to purposefully shoot the same amount of threes in the first half to go up by as much as you did in the second half when you were up even greater, and then just sit on it. Like you just said, okay, we're up by 20 with 9 minutes left. We can just play possession ball. But they were taking shots at like 29 seconds.
Should have just played four corners like old Dean Smith and just passed it around. And
you could have just shot clock violationed for like the rest of the game, like 20 points in 9 minutes. Actually, let's if I do the math here, if you hold the ball for the 30-second shot clock every single time, USF reasonably has to score much more. Oh my god, I'm befuddled by it. Like, and that's not even the biggest deficit that a team had to overcome, but to overcome it that late in the game, that's insane to me.
So you see, so just looking at the Ken, and the win probabilities are fun, but this is the Ken Palm one. I'll share that with everyone here on it's watching live on YouTube. Here's the win probability graphic. The thing that really sticks out to me is you see there's a 13-2 run by UTSA, and then to finish the game, you have a 15-2 run and a 16-0 run. It's like wild.
That too is free throws, by the way. Those 2 points by UTSA, those were free throws.
It's crazy.
That's wild to me. Like I still, again, I will give credit to USF for coming. They had to make the shots. They had to game plan it. Kudos to Coach Fletcher. Coach the guys into it. They didn't stop believing. But my God, what were you saying on UTSA's bench to like have this happen?
Keep chucking. Like I don't know. Yeah, it's rough, but like you said, USF fought back, earned it. But man, sometimes it takes two to tango in those situations. they helped you out. But just another kind of another week of USF men's basketball where you get kind of an exciting, thrilling game after kind of a couple tough ones. Going to, I think since we last recorded, they played Memphis, lost 80-65, then lost 78-85 at UAB. So it's just been kind of, it's nice for them to get this comeback. I don't think it changes a lot in terms of long-term trajectory or anything like that, but it is always nice to have these fun moments during tough seasons. So really good job by those guys fighting on the road, getting a road win, and totally surprising Steeg, who's dumbfounded even this morning.
Poor Paige. Last night it was like 10:05, and like I'm staring at my phone, and she's like, "What are you looking at?" And I'm like, USF was losing by 20 points in the second half, and they're up by 3. And she kind of like looked at me for a second. She's like, "What?" Yeah, and I mean, I will forever be dumbfounded by that. Like, I never thought that USF would be on the positive end of that. Like, that's always like a joking. Oh, like, USF is up by like 18 against like, Florida State College at Southwest Florida or something like that, and then it's like, oh shit, they're coming back. Like, this is going to be painful. So I'm glad we were on the positive end of it for once.
Yes, yeah, we've seen the other side of it, and it's tough. So, so good end of the week for USF men's basketball. Not the greatest week, but good into it, and always fun to kind of, like you said, be on the right end of these kind of crazy games. Women's basketball keeps on chugging along. We'll talk a little bit more about the kind of more advanced looks and their kind of what their postseason possibilities might be in the Ponderosa, but we were on the air last week with their kind of cardiac comeback there, and then they just went out and kind of waxed the two next teams they played, which we thought they probably would. Next up is Memphis on Saturday. This looks like a stretch where they should probably win out, right?
Yeah, I mean, Memphis is pretty bad. And then
Tulsa. Memphis, Tulsa, at Tulsa, and then East Carolina for senior night.
That East Carolina one is like a tricky one, but they should be fine here. I mean, they're rolling right now. They are playing very cohesively. I don't let either that Florida Atlantic or that Charlotte like final score box like fool you. Like, neither one of those games were particularly very close.
They were up nearly 30 against Charlotte, weren't they?
Yeah, and then Charlotte hit like 4 threes in a row in the fourth quarter to like bring it back. It really wasn't close. Like, Florida Atlantic at least like somewhat played like staunch defense to like keep it close. Like, they got it within like 2 at one point. But there was like really never any time where you didn't feel like USF was just going to just uncork a couple and just win. So 2 very, very good wins for them, though, at least on the metric side of things, because now more than anything, it's like you need to start having like double-digit victories to kind of seal your RPI fate a little bit. Like, you can't let a team hang around for a little bit. Like, Rice is fine because Rice has like a decent RPI, but like USF needs to start winning like basically the rest of their games by at least 15 points if they need to improve anything there.
Yeah, I think it was 56-28 going into the fourth quarter against Charlotte. So
yeah,
not exactly a tight game. I think another really good thing about that is it seems like the rotation has somewhat tightened up. You go look at kind of the minutes against FAU, and you've got 4 girls over 35 or more. I'm sure that can be something that if you can kind of these next few games spread those minutes out a little bit going into the tournament, you're going to need probably those fresh legs, because it definitely feels like an at-large is unlikely. We'll talk more about that in the Ponderosa, but they're going to need to make a little run, I think. So hopefully they can put some of these away early, rest some of these girls a little bit, let them get ready for the tournaments coming up here. So
it's funny actually thinking about it. Both Jose and Ben Fletcher both basically did the same thing around the same time for two very different reasons. Men's basketball is having Jaden Reed come off the bench right now, mostly because of the size factor, but also, for him and for on the women's side for Vicky Blastage, like they both play a very high volume game. And I think them coming off the bench, playing against another team's bench, kind of gives USF an advantage for both sides because Vicky went off for like 15, 16 points, I think, against Charlotte. I should probably pull up the box score since I have it like right next to me.
Shoot from the hip.
Yeah, shoot from the hip. 19, I was close. She went for 19 points off the bench. And like when I say off the bench, like put air quotes around it, she played 35 minutes off the bench. Like she played more minutes than like Sadie Puisis and Laura Putu and most of the starters. But having Jeanette start the game, Jeanette's still very capable offensively, can score at a decent clip as well, can distribute the ball well. But she kind of complements the Sammy, Laura, Carla line a little bit better than Vicky, who you could probably rely on Vicky next year to be that one. But, for right now, at least you can kind of have them take a step back, come off the bench, score at a high volume there. Same thing with Jaden Reed. If you're going up against starters, he can kind of get a little lost in the weeds every once in a while, get a little too reliant on leading, both scoring wise and by, the being the general there. But yeah, just good stuff for them to figure out these start rotations. But yeah, I love seeing Jennifer Silva get 4 points. That was probably the most pleasant of all pleasant surprises.
Yeah, and I think they're going to need more of those pleasant surprises the next 3 games, because you're coming off, going back and looking. You played you had some girls play over 50 minutes or close to 50 minutes in that triple overtime game. Then some played heavy minutes against FAU. So it was really helpful for them to kind of get that big lead against Charlotte, get some other people some run. And I think they're going to need to do that again coming into the tournament. So hopefully we get more fun surprises like that. Basketball's winding down, but we've got some other round ball sports heating up, Steeg.
Beautiful segue.
Baseball, which is round, much like a basketball. The games are different, but the balls are similar.
They should make a movie about this.
Basketball? That's interesting. What a concept. Steeg, baseball started under new coach Hannes. Pretty good start, I'd say. I think he got a good grade from some of the baseball writers around the country. What is your thought on kind of the start of the Hannes era?
When we were first diagnosing Iowa, I was looking at it. I was like, damn, like that's a good squad. Like that's a really well coached program. Their manager has been there for like 17 years or something like that. And he's like won over 30 games every single year that he's been there. They were coming off of being like the number 1 offense in the Big Ten. They have a like day 2 drafted pitcher as their Friday starter and like a deep bullpen. Like I was looking at that, I was like, damn. Like I know Hannes likes to schedule tough, but like, could we like scale it down a little bit? But USF baseball absolutely probably shocked the shit out of some people with the series win over Iowa. Like if that was like a brand new Iowa team or something like that, then that'd be one thing. But like that was a pretty established team, and they pretty much handled it. Like the opening win 5-4, Iowa crawled back a little bit at the end there, but USF was able to overcome a pretty early deficit to take the lead there and to maintain it with a deep bullpen. That 2-8 loss, you could chalk up to a few different things. Probably some nerves here and there, but having at least a solid Friday and Saturday starter for USF right now is going to pay its dividends because that bullpen is really, really deep. I thought maybe they would have like 5 or 6 serviceable arms out of that bullpen. They have like 10. Like they have 10 guys that I could probably rely on if they need to go 1 inning and get all 3 outs. There's a few guys that are like probably still warming up to it a little bit here and there. Going back to that 2-8 loss, I'm doing the smart thing and I'm pulling up the box score so I don't forget it. James Hill officially got the loss. 2 innings pitched, 5 hits, gave up 3 earned runs. Matt Brown came in right after. Matt Brown looked really good for about 2 innings and then kind of imploded in the last inning and a quarter there. Gave up 3 hits and 3 earned runs as well. But then Lex Sanchez, Aiden Longoria, and then Corey Kling came in for the final 3 innings and gave up 3 hits and 2 earned runs. So much more serviceable, at that point. So I think where USF really is going to excel this year, surprisingly, and I know I just talked about the deep bench for like a minute there, they batted very well against a really deep Iowa bullpen as well. Really dug into some counts. And aside again from Saturday where, Aaron Samarie from Iowa pitched 6 innings and only gave up 2 hits and 2 earned runs. And then their traditional closer came in to shut the door. They pretty much forced these Iowa pitchers into long pitch counts, like 3-2 counts, and kept fouling off, kept making contact, deep fly balls that were getting caught in the outfield. A lot of them hit the warning track. That was a good opening series for USF. And then they followed it up by not getting absolutely embarrassed by a top 10 team, which I think is a great blessing in disguise. I wish that game ended up being a little bit closer, but, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Losing 6-2 kind of sucks. But there were times where the Florida State beat writers were kind of sweating it a little bit. Like USF was able to kind of bat around and force this really, really, really talented College World Series-esque team into having to pull in a few extra guys for some extended periods. So overall, pretty good start.
Yeah, and Bay Area Examiner approved Ryan Pruitt. Transfer has started off the season pretty hot, batting .462. Also doing some good stuff in the old advanced stats, and we'll get to some of those in the Ponderosa. But he's hitting the ball pretty well. A couple home runs already, 6 RBIs. Obviously had the big one on Friday. So, and he's got a great walk-up song, right?
Yeah, it does. Unwritten by beautiful. Just gorgeous.
There you go. So he's ready to roll. Softball also kicked off. We'll talk a little bit more baseball on the Ponderosa. Softball is also kicked off. They had a pretty interesting tournament. We talked a little bit about it last week where I was kind of like looking at the records. I was like, oh, that's a tournament they should win. And you kind of dug into it a little more. You're like, well, actually, as to preview the game on Twitter, that, these teams' records weren't great, but they'd played some pretty good competition beforehand. So not a bunch of slouches, but you go in and you win the tournament here, beating Penn State twice, Loyola Chicago twice, and St. John's. Louisville game got canceled, but they're going to play them in the another tournament style, the South Florida Showdown, which starts tomorrow. And like we said last week, softball seems to be it's got to be one of the better spectator sports because of just how many games you can get in one day.
Yeah, I mean, if you go on Saturday, I think if you start at 9 a.m. you'll have a game every single 2.5 hours, basically. Home team usually play in the afternoon and evening, but I mean, you could get there bright early, have a cup of coffee, watch I think Wisconsin is playing Troy.
You got 9 a.m. on Saturday. You got Michigan and Louisville.
Yep.
And then you got 9 a.m., 11:15, 1:30, a 4 p.m., a 6:15, and an 8:30 is USF against Kent State.
Beautiful.
So yeah, it's you got a bunch of games there on Saturday.
Yeah, there's a
6 games. What
they
value?
charge you per game technically, but just go to the bathroom between the games, hang in there for a little bit, make your way over. Not endorsed.
Yes,
But
no,
yeah,
but
the greatest part. Yeah, that can, anyways, uh, the greatest part about this the memorial tournament that USF won. They did it in different ways. Three of those games were won by run rule, which is fantastic. I was pretty candid that I thought USF struggled at the plate mightily last year, but sometimes it's precedence, and other times it's looking like they're much more consistent at scoring a few runs this year. They've had, let's see, 9, 5, 7, 12, 5, 12, 9, 5, 13. So overall, a lot of runs scored, and then got into a few pitching duels here and there against Penn State and Michigan. Michigan being on the losing side, Penn State being on the winning side. So overall, pretty good start for USF softball. I think that they're starting to make a little bit of noise in like the mid-major realm. Kind of talked about it in the Discord a little bit. If we're being completely honest about the current state of collegiate softball, there is like 3 or 4 teams that can win a national championship. And I think this is like just the overarching nature of mid-major sports. You basically get your roses if you can just beat Power 5 opponents, or win your conference tournament, and or see how far you can get in regionals, because everything after regionals is basically gravy at that point. But USF has at least a good way to really just get some Power 5 wins under their belt. They've already got a handful, with Penn State. They do get a really fun tournament here coming up after this South Florida showdown.
and the Longhorn Invitational.
I don't know how, why, or when they got invited, or what scheduling kind of allowed for this, but they get a fairly light schedule there. They get to play New Mexico State, who's decent at softball, Abilene Christian, and Alabama A&M, who they should just absolutely destroy. And then guess what? You get to play fucking Texas
Twice.
So that'll be nice and fun.
Yeah. So yeah, they definitely have not. This is not a easy schedule stacking of wins here. Like you said, a lot of Power 4, Power 5 opponents. Michigan, who they'll play, they've already played Michigan. They're ranked, receiving votes one poll, 22nd the other. They played Florida, who's 3-2, and then they're going to play Texas, who's number 1 in both polls. So definitely not taking it easy, but that those kind of the old iron sharpens iron, get you ready for the conference play. So, and that means something in some of these sports, right? Mm-hmm. Your conference actually means something, so that's always good. All right, so softball doing well, good start to the year, and I think if they can kind of have the same kind of performance in this next little tournament, they'll be doing quite well.
Oh yeah.
So let's see what else we got. I think I think we're going to end pretty soon here. Oh, we want to talk a little bit of women's lacrosse.
Yeah, they had their tough test and unfortunately failed.
But I think they played. I was, first of all, if you're not following Coach on Twitter, you got to follow, because she does. It's a really, really cool thing where she kind of goes back and breaks down the games, like after she watches them, and gives her perspective on what they could have done better, what they did well, where they need to improve, maybe like take a slight, maybe a slight, nod to the officials here and there, but most of our, we could, we don't need to foul as much, or, that could also be like, hey, they're calling a lot of fouls. But that's really cool. I thought, so make sure you're following her on Twitter if you have any, if you want to learn a little bit about lacrosse from the coach and how she sees it. But, it seemed like it was a tough start, but then they came out and played a pretty good Florida team really well.
Yeah. I mean, Mindy kind of said it best. They scored the same amount of goals as a top high profile Johns Hopkins team against Florida. I think the thing was for USF, they were called for a lot of fouls. And by a lot, I mean like 20 something fouls, and that doesn't include all the free position shots that UF also had. But they were able to basically keep Florida sweating the entire time. Up until Florida scored about, I think that 18th goal that they scored, so their final goal. Like I follow a few beat writers during the games as well, and it was kind of like USF is kind of hanging around here. Like you gotta kind of shut the door on this here soon. Statistically, they kind of kept it at like a 5-goal deficit almost the entire game. I think at times it got like a little bit more pointsy, but yeah, for all intents and purposes, UF went up 5-0, and then USF crawled their way back to 8-5 during the second quarter. So again, a lot of really good expectation things, but I'm going to count this real quick. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 cards to 2 UF cards. So a handful of green and yellow cards gives the other team a man advantage, and it showcased itself whenever I think UF scored on the man advantage that they had. So
yeah. So but exciting. I think especially first year program.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of really good stuff to build on, and excited to watch more and learn more. I think it could be a pretty good spectator sport, and both just thinking about that and the baseball against Florida State, both had really good crowds in town for that, and USF performed well in both games. So that's always good when you get some eyeballs to catch them for future. So I'm sure USF was able to do that. Let's end with a little tennis talk, Steeg. We've got some positive tennis news.
We do, thank God. Yeah. So men's tennis is absolutely on a roll right now. I should have had this up on what their record is right now. But they just traveled down to Boca to face Florida Atlantic and then UC Santa Barbara and came away with 2 4-3 victories, which is fantastic. They are 7-2 on the season. Their 2 losses came at Miami, 2-5, and then against UCF, 3-4. UCF, I think, is like top 15 at this point, and Miami is in the top 20 as well. But USF, with their victories, some of them very convincing, has found themselves into the top 50 of the ITA tennis rankings for their team rankings. So they are currently 2 slots behind Tulsa in the American Athletic Conference, and they are actually ahead of the University of Florida, interestingly enough. Something to keep an eye on. But yeah, no, this is fantastic. I follow a bunch of tennis professionals for college. The general consensus that I was getting from whatever they would talk about the American Athletic Conference was that USF was probably going to be fine this year. They weren't probably going to make too much noise. But man, they are unbelievably good. They are really, really deep. Hugo Carr, who plays on court 1 for USF, he was the JUCO national champion last year. He's ranked number 84 in singles this year. So they have a really deep roster, and they unfortunately had to go into it a little bit. One of their players, Thomas Pavlikovich Smith, is injured. He tore his rotator cuff. So he's out for the rest of the year. So USF is having to rely on some extra bodies here and there, but overall, they're playing fantastic, and they're about to get into the crux of a very interesting stretch of games. They are playing the University of Pacific, then Oregon, at like a little Pacific, invitational. Don't know how these teams were decided on going, but that's the way it happens. Then they play at TCU on the way home from that before welcoming a few other schools, UNC Wilmington, Furman, UCF, and then Penn, and then they get underway on conference slates. So They should be in pretty good position at this point to make some a pretty good noise. They've already beaten and they're already 1-0 in conference. They beat Wichita State here. You can basically get to maybe 4-2 in conference this year. They might really make some noise in the postseason.
Yeah, and Augustine Cuellar is one player of the week for the conference. He's undefeated so far this season, playing singles 2 and 3. 4-2 in double. So another good performer for this USF men's tennis team. So good stuff.
That's the good tennis.
That's right. We're not going to talk about the other tennis. We've talked about that in the Ponderosa, but we've got other things to talk about in the Ponderosa. We've got some advanced stats for basketball, making how likely is it the women's team can make the tournament. And some fun numbers for baseball as well. Steve, we're gonna have to get our Bill James books back out and get all the advanced baseball stats and the BABIPs and the WHIPs and the Sierras now and the
none of these are real to me.
We're gonna be going through it. But we're gonna learn. And so we have some nice advanced stats for baseball that we're gonna go through on the Ponderosa. You can join us there by becoming a member on Patreon. $5 a month to get you into the Discord, and $10 a month to get you the extra podcast each week. So 4 extra pieces of content, typically at least per month. And all the money we generate there goes to covering games. So as we expand and grow, we'll be able to cover more games. This is like an exponential type thing, hopefully. So join us there. And Steeg, go Bulls.
Go Bulls.